Welcome back to the Zone MMA. Sean O'Connell, Dan Hardy here. The first half of the PFL regular season wrapped up this past weekend in Las Vegas. It was lightweights and welterweights taking center stage, an absolutely stacked and loaded card. And the order was kind of reversed, Dan Hardy, because the early part of the broadcast was on linear TV on ESPN, and then the later part of the card was on ESPN Plus, streaming exclusively. So the matchmaking had to be split to where you had really two main events. And we got two main events. Last year's lightweight champion, OAM, Shane Burgos, on the ESPN main event. Last year's welterweight champion, Sadabusi, Jarrah Al-Salawi, on the streaming main event. Stellar card, lots of fun. I know you were watching from across the pond. Was there any fight or fighter in particular that jumped out to you before I start running through my superlatives?
Oh man, I mean, different fighters for different reasons. Sadabusi is terrifying, as is Goltsov. Both scary individuals. But I learned a lot from watching Natan Schultz. His grappling was incredible. Just his balance, his hip pressure. I've watched that fight a couple of times. I've made a few notes. I was very, very impressed with him from a technical standpoint. And I know how good Stevie Ray is on the ground. So for him to be controlled as well as he was, it was an incredible performance.
Yeah, Natan Schultz we had 5 belt holders on the card. Natan Schultz, the only guy who already has 2 PFL belts, going for a third one. He's the only one in this season, by the way, who has a chance of being a third-time belt holder, because all the other 2-timers are either out for whatever issue. They're not competing in the season this year. So Natan Schultz chasing a third belt, and he got off to a good start against an incredibly tough Stevie Ray and his grappling. You would think that if you're Natan Schultz, you're the Schultz camp, and obviously he trains down there at ATT, you'd be like, all right, maybe your clearest advantage over someone like Stevie Ray is the striking, because Schultz loves to just, zombie forward and throw punches and bunches. He's a big volume striker, a lot of combinations. Stevie has plenty of power, but no one out there is going to say that Schultz is at a disadvantage in striking against Stevie Ray. So you would think, oh, maybe that's how you keep this fight standing. But he was like, nope, I'm going to out-grapple the grappler, and he did so effectively, to your point.
Yeah, just a really slick game plan, really, really confident in everything that he did. Stevie Ray's very, very good, but as you said, I would have imagined that Schultz would have chosen to strike with him, because Stevie's grappling is probably the strongest part of his game. But he chose to use his wrestling offensively instead, and just his hip pressure, his guard passing, his ability to keep smashing any kind of butterfly hooks every time Stevie Ray tried to elevate. Just really impressive, and a good performance from a learning standpoint. It's the kind of fight I would be recommending to other young fighters. Like, watch this top pressure, watch how well he controls and stays safe in with his sub defense. I'm excited to see where he goes from here, because I just think he's got such experience. He's such a well-rounded fighter. You kind of feel like he's just going to be able to adapt to whatever he faces in the tournament.
All right, I want to stop what I'll say is kind of the top. The fight card was all crazy order-wise, but you had all those belt holders and all these hopefuls, all these guys that are real contenders. I've got like 4 names on my list of how the hell do you beat that guy, okay? You got 2 Magomeds, 2 people named Magomed that I have no idea how you could beat them right now, okay? Magomed Karimov was a 2018 champion at welterweight. He was a 2021 runner-up, lost by knockout to Ray Cooper III in the rematch from that 2018 championship, right? He looked incredible, return to form, 6-point first-round finish against Ben Egley, only took just over a minute. Looked like an absolute killer, right? Magomed Umalatov, still undefeated in his career. He's only 30 years of age. He's got crazy power. I think he improved to 13-0 with 11 knockouts. It might even be 12 knockouts. This dude is scary. And he beat Delano Taylor, who's far from being a slouch. Okay, so those 2 guys are on my how the hell do you beat them list. The same is true of someone you already mentioned, Sadabusi. The book on Sadabusi used to be take him down and just make sure he can't kick you and you'll be fine. Or catch one of those kicks, use that to take him down, and you're going to be fine in that fight. You might have to ride out a grinder type of a decision, press him against the cage. Just don't be at range with a 6'3" welterweight with precision striking. Now you can't take him down. So how the hell do you beat Sadibou C? And then on the ESPN main event, the Canadian gangster OAM, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, spoils the debut of Shane Burgos, so we can get into that a little bit more detail. How do you beat OAM? Because he is better than anyone in the PFL and maybe all of mixed martial arts at imposing his will and his game plan on a fight, making you fight his type of fight. So we got 4 guys from this one card. I don't know how you beat them.
You make good points. I mean, OAM is just such a good competitor. He's so controlled. He's so mature in his decision making. You know, there's no rushing in, and that's really the difference in the fight with Burgos. You know, Burgos is a game fighter. He likes to press forward. Of course, the pressure was on him because he was making his PFL debut, and he wanted to make sure everyone knew that he'd arrived. So he really wanted to you know, draw OAM into a scrap. But he's just too disciplined for that. He's too sharp, too smart. He made good decisions, used good footwork to stay just at the end of Burgos's range and punish him every time he got an opportunity. I mean, you know, how do you beat him? And Sadibou C as well. Like, you know, I've fought 6'3", 6'4" welterweights, but they don't look as big as he does. Like, yeah, he's 6'3", but he's also a long, like heavily muscled individual. And the way that he moves now, like the thing in, you know, previously you'd be able to close him down, as you said, close him down, get a good body lock on him and put him on his back. And then you can start to really slow him down. But now with his footwork and his movement and also, you know, his ability to time that kick/knee to the body, like, you don't want to run onto that. You've got to be really, really cautious when you close in range against him and how. And because he doesn't mind fighting off the back foot and he just kind of glides along the fence so well, it's difficult to know when you can commit without getting picked off on the way in. Very, very exciting at the moment. You know, the solid welterweights and lightweights that we've got coming through. I mean, you could literally mix them up in a bag and throw them on the table, and any matchup that you get would be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the way the standings are working out right now. I mean, welterweight, you had a bunch of finishes, so that's going to be probably the 2 Magas and Sadibou. I would imagine somewhere in the playoff picture. We're going to need some really impressive stuff to knock those guys all the way out. But man, there are other tough welterweights here. I don't want to gloss over any of the other people. Naib Lopez made a successful PFL debut, stayed undefeated in his career. There were a lot of people who were saying, like, oh, he's been fighting on kind of the Mexican regional scene, no real tough competition. He took on Shane Mitchell and dominated that entire fight, right? So, like, was it as flashy as what we saw from any of the names previously mentioned? No, but he grinded out a win in like the biggest stage by far of his career against the toughest opponent by far of his career. So maybe another guy to pay attention to. I do want to highlight a showcase bout, though. We had Zach Jusela and Brandon Jenkins that were squaring off in it was showcase affair. No points, no playoff standings on the line, just 2 individuals trying to impress the bosses, hoping they can be the alternate if someone falls out of the season because of, you know, an injury, hoping they can maybe be part of next year's welterweight roster. 2 guys who've had a mixed bag of success and loss in their career, so neither of them have incredibly impressive records, and they just brawled in one of the funnest, most back and forth incredible fights that I've called in a long time.
It was amazing. It was. I would have definitely been on my feet. I could see you through the fence. You were on your feet. It was just a wild one. You know, one of those fights where you kind of go, you know, you're not interested in the finesse or the technical abilities of the fighters, even though, you know, both of them had a decent skill set. It was more about the guts and determination. And, you know, of course, that's what you get from Jenkins anyway, that he's a bit of a wild man like that. He throws himself into the fire. But he was able to draw Jusela into that kind of fight as well. And, it made for a really good scrap, you know, a showcase bout, you know, something that stirs the rest of the welterweights on the card to make them raise their game. You know, and I think it worked. You know, straight away after that was Carlos Leal, right? I think that was the next fight on. He beat David Zavada, who's a very, very tough, well-rounded, experienced welterweight, former UFC vet. You know, we can't forget about Leal as well. I think he's eyeing this tournament and expecting to be able to knock a couple more people out. It's very exciting. You know, we've got loads and loads of matchups that have never happened before that we could potentially see in the coming months. That, you know, I honestly, it would take me a few days to really think about how I would see those fights going, because like you said, how do you beat those guys? How do you beat Sadabusi? How do you beat Magomed Kerimov? I don't know. I don't have the answers. Fortunately, no one's asking me to find them.
I'm glad you brought up Carlos Leal. Carlos, please don't be angry at me. I'm sorry. We had so much going on. Carlos Leal. So all these welterweights we're talking about that are kind of in the top of the standings right now, with the exception of Naib Lopez, Carlos Leal has 6 points. Both Magas have 6 points. Sadabusi has 5 points heading into the second half of the regular season. And I think more importantly, with all of those guys, they either have a PFL belt at home, proving to us that they've been able to do this whole season format before, or they have wins over previous belt holders, right? So in the realm of the PFL, they've either taken a championship themselves or they've beaten a guy who's taken home a championship. So some names to deal with at welterweight. Another superlative for me. People think I oversell Clay Collard because I think he's the most exciting lightweight in the business. He has an incredible dance partner last Friday night in someone that we hadn't seen yet. Yamato Nishikawa is only 20 years of age. That was his 31st pro fight, and he's only 20, right? And he weathered the storm from Clay Collard early, ended up kicking the legs out from Collard, compromising his balance, compromising his base. I thought stealing around in the second from Clay Collard. Collard ends up getting the decision, but this is one of those fights I wish there wasn't a loser in this fight, because Yamato Nishikawa, at 20 years of age, going up against someone like Collard, who has wins over Jeremy Stevens and Anthony Pettis, and Fight of the Nights in the UFC, and perennial contender in the PFL. A 20-year-old Dan came in making his PFL debut and gave that man everything he could handle, while also giving him about 6 inches of reach. This dude, this young man from Japan, is a problem.
Yeah, a very exciting prospect to keep an eye on. A little bit undersized, if anything. I thought he looked like he was being pushed around a bit by Collard, but that's Collard's style, isn't it? You know, he's a bit of a high-paced bully. I thought he looked very sharp. I thought he looked good, and you know, of course, it's a big ask to step in there against Clay Collard, someone with the kind of experience and determination that he fights with. At such a young age, I couldn't imagine being in there under that kind of pressure. But you've got to imagine it was an amazing learning experience for him. He's going to take that away. He's going to add things to his game. He's going to probably, you know, I mean, he's going to know what he's dealing with against the American fighters that come in much bigger often. You know, that's a bit of a difference for him compared to probably what he was facing in his earlier career. He was fighting people probably a bit more of a similar size, whereas Clay Collard comes in big for that weight class, and I think that was one of the differences for me in the fight. But you know, smart thing to do: attack his legs, slow him down, kind of, you know, try and halt that forward pressure. And as you know, such a young man as well, you've got to think his future's still very bright.
Yeah, incredibly experienced, as I mentioned already, for that age. And, you know, if it doesn't work out at 155 pounds, I'd like to see him take a crack at 145. He weighed in, I think, at 153 and a half for this fight. So I'm sure he could make 145. But Yamato Nishikawa, someone to watch moving forward. And the reason I feel comfortable bringing up someone who lost their fight in the first half of the regular season, I mean, Collard looked like Collard does. Vintage performance from him, incredible volume. He threw 300 plus strikes in the fight, landed 200 strikes in the fight. That's what you're going to get from Clay Collard. If you look at the lightweight standings, everybody has 3 points. There were no finishes at lightweight, which means heading into the second half of the regular season, if you get a first round finish, you're in the playoffs. A second round finish might even get you into the playoffs, even if you lost in your first bout. So things are wide open at 155 pounds in a way that maybe they're not at welterweight. Maybe they're not at light heavyweight. So plenty to watch when we get to Atlanta. It was an incredible card in Vegas as we closed out the first 3 weeks of the regular season. Lightweights, welterweights, and a bonus heavyweight bout. Dennis Goltsov. What's a superlative for Dennis Goltsov? Like, how do you not have a belt already, Dennis Goltsov? This dude is so scary. He's a World Combat Sambo champion many times over. He's got maybe the best jab in the heavyweight division in the sport of mixed martial arts. Stellar grappling on top of that. He just went to work and got himself 6 points.
Definitely another one to keep an eye on. I wouldn't like to try and figure out a way around his game, because as you said, I mean, anything that you've got to do on the feet, you've got to deal with his jab. And as soon as he decides to take you down, if he finds himself in top position up against the fence, I mean, he's so well positioned with his hips. He's so well controlling. It's so good at controlling his opponent with his body position that it allows him to strike quite freely with his hands. A scary individual, someone that's destined to have a belt around his waist at some point in the future, if not the end of this year.
Effective ground and pound is in some ways a lost art in the sport. Being able to put real power on punches and actually render someone unconscious. Yeah, you can do the volume thing. You can get someone to turtle up. But throwing strikes from the top and actually putting someone out, there's not a lot of fighters in MMA that are doing that right now. Dennis Goltsov did that on Friday night. Scary dude. Second half of the regular season begins June 8th in Atlanta. Obviously, I'm going to be there. Hopefully, we can get Dan Hardy to come over and join us in person for one of the Atlanta shows. You never know. He's a very big deal. Lots more to talk about on DAZN MMA.